Summer temperatures rise across the country. Urban areas are at more risk during heat waves, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, of the United Nations. Now, urban areas get devoid of vegetation and water bodies, and therefore they experience what's called intensified urban heat island. Consider this: Delhi has lost forest cover for the first time in a decade, with a decrease of about half a square kilometre since 2019. Now, this may not look like a big number standalone, but it's important to note that Delhi's forest cover is at about 13% of geographical area, already below national average of 22%. Delhi's water bodies are disappearing as well. Now, government agencies have submitted requests for the deletion of 232 water bodies, representing over 22% of the total 1,045 water bodies in Delhi. They cited encroachment and other reasons. But despite a mandate set 7 years ago, not a single wetland in Delhi has been officially notified. Let's talk about Bengaluru, which is facing an acute water shortage, or was facing just a few months ago. Now, over the past 20 years, approximately 65 lakes have disappeared in this city. Over the last 25 years, Bengaluru has experienced a temperature increase of about 1.5 degrees Celsius. Once known as a city of gardens, the BDA Master Plan of 2015, of course, there's nothing after that, says that 7.81% of Bengaluru's comprises of open spaces. Imagine, only about 8%. Finally, Mumbai. Mumbai has lost a whopping 81% of its open land, 40% of its green cover, and around 30% of its water bodies between 1991 and 2018. A recent study indicates there's been a 2 degrees Celsius rise in Mumbai's average temperature of over 27 years. Mumbai also has the lowest open spaces amongst all Indian cities, in fact, probably even globally. Currently, open spaces constitute 3.7% of the city's total area. So how are we going to combat rising heat waves? Madhav Pai, the statistics are only to talk or lay the foundation to how large is the problem that we're dealing with.
So yeah, we have to accept that the problem is large and we need systematic large action. You started with the loss of green cover. It's, you know what, now science says that you need about 7 trees per person. In Mumbai, there are places where there is 1 tree for 450 people, right? So how do we rapidly increase greening in cities becomes extremely important. And there are ways, very scientific ways in which you can put a greening agenda. Again, it's not about just planting any trees. Then you have to be specific about what site, what location, what kind of species, is there the water. So very scientific approach to planting trees, planting with a plan. The second thing is the lack of water bodies. You talked about Bangalore. There is data across the top cities. 40-50% of urban development happens on land which is actually the highest recharge zones, etc. So how do we do urban development, even continue to do urban development, which we will, because we are going to, the urban population is going to double. We do it in a way that land that is used is able to still continue to absorb water and retain water. So I think urban development where water becomes extremely important, allowing water to sort of seep in and water bodies, etc., becomes extremely important, has to be done. The third point is really around heat island effect. Very clearly now we see with land surface temperature data that heat island effect is 6 to 8 degrees, right? As soon as, and it's so, think about it, you are in a 40-degree temperature heat island effect, you are experiencing probably 54 degrees in that particular place, as what we call albedo measurement. It is the measurement that you, so heat island, if wherever the heat island effect is 6 to 8, and we have published some data between Dharavi and Matunga, which are the two neighboring suburbs, where Dharavi shows 6 degrees extra temp. How do you now plant trees? How do you create water bodies within Dharavi to sort of, so understanding the heat island effect impact. The final point I want to make is cooling. See, 75% of India's demand for energy is going to come from cooling.
Right.
And Today, if we have our total energy use is about 220 gigawatts. We will need in another 15-20 years, we'll need 220 gigawatts just for cooling, right? So one is actually how do we transfer? It's not about architecture. I think architects understand. It's about transforming the building construction industry.
Okay, hold your thought there. I do need to go to the other guests. We only have about 2 minutes left, but Nishant Lall, take it forward from where Madhav Pai has left. What can we do with our built environment to ensure that the cooling energy consumption comes down dramatically?
I think one thing is very clear that in terms of strategy, there are digital tools to really map your green tree cover, and that should be systematized in all cities in India. The government has already done very good work in traffic planning and smart cities. So the city-based cooling plan has to be prepared. The cool areas have to be mapped out and reinforced. Some areas are already naturally shaded. They are in water corridors. They have moisture content higher than some areas. They have to be mapped out. And there are digital tools to simulate these environments very easily. That lays in a very nice scientific methodology. Second thing, when we are doing new buildings, we have to make sure they are able to ventilate naturally, even in between them. It is the trapped heat amongst the buildings which is not able to move out of that space. That heat island effect is exacerbated. So we really need to design buildings, design cluster of buildings with a mix of ventilation areas. We have to stop paving all around our buildings. That reflects and makes it much more. We really have to unpave a lot of these. In many cities in Europe, they have a plan to unpave certain areas. Reducing asphalt cover is also a goal. So many ways how the building really behaves as an organic entity with the heat. So we really need to take it the science way, and we hope designers and other administrators will follow that route and understand this a little better.
Right. Dr. Indu, things like reflective roofs, etc., ventilation, these are very sitting duck ideas, but I still see that all the new stock, very little of the new stock of residential or commercial projects which are coming up are really using these principles. I see more of glass, which is probably actually the most heat absorbent. How do we bring this mind shift?
People who work with environmental friendly materials in the building sector, they said, people have this impression that when you move towards sustainable kind of housing materials, it is very expensive or it cannot withstand disasters. But then people have trying to do pilots and then say that, it is as good as any others that are there. So I guess there needs to be more conversations in the public spaces, more community engagement, which kind of showcases that the kind of technologies, which are, a lot of them are vernacular designs that are coming back into the oak, which means to say there are ways to do it, but you need to kind of get that messaging to the people who are actually building. 50% of the building stock is yet to be built, which means it's a great opportunity for us to redesign our cities, redesign the way we are expanding, and then try and come up with, maybe better public spaces, better kind of roofs. And of course, let's not forget the vulnerable population. I mean, what we are talking about is high-rise buildings probably. I'm hoping that the kind of experience that we are having this year and in the coming years will definitely kind of move the needle in the right direction.
Right direction. And I think we need a lot more regulation around it. I think Absolutely. It's been a little bit, free for all. You get a platinum rating, but that platinum rating is really on OPEX and operational energy efficiencies that you have. No one's looking at the building construction per se, the design per se. Are they doing the best or not? Well, Dr. Indu K Murthy, Nishant Lall and Madhav Pai, thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm going to conclude by saying there are solutions. We know what has to be done. We simply need to recognize that it's a big and important issue to solve. How do we prepare our cities against rising heat waves? Thank you so much for joining me today on Urban Agenda. Are Indian cities prepared for rising temperatures and increasingly hot summers? Now let's spell out some facts. On 28th April, temperatures reached 43.6 degrees Celsius in the Ram Mandir locality in the western suburbs of Mumbai, which is a coastal city, and they exceeded 40 degrees Celsius in the eastern suburb of Vidyavihar. Now, Bangalore, a city which did not need any air conditioning just a decade ago, has experienced a rainless April, unprecedented in 41 years, with temperatures breaching 40 degrees Celsius in some areas. On 5th May this year, yes, we did have a good April, but come May, Delhi recorded its hottest day of the year, reaching 41 degrees centigrade, exceeding the seasonal average by 2 degrees. Sitting in our air-conditioned homes and offices, we may not realize the brunt of it, but cities are on the boil. And this is no longer a dystopian future. Unbearable summers are becoming a reality. So how do we rewire our cities for rising heat waves? Joining me for this very important discussion are Dr. Indu K Murthy. She is a Principal Research Scientist at CSTEP, which is a Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy. Nishant Lall, Urban Designer and Founder, NilaA Studios, Delhi, and Madhav Pai, CEO of WRI India. Dr. Indu and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Just to set the context for our viewers, I'm going to divide today's discussion into 3 parts. 1, what are the immediate steps our city administrators need to take and we as civilians must support to minimize the severe impact of rising temperatures? 2nd, what are the long-term realities we must acknowledge, knowing that it's almost certain now that global temperatures will blast past 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. In fact, a latest survey done by The Guardian, climate scientists expect the temperatures to rise to as much as 2.5 degrees with disastrous consequences on lives and livelihood. And finally, what are the preparations we must begin today to prepare urban India from this inevitable rise in temperatures? Yes, everyone needs to prepare, including the villages, because this is urban agenda. We are putting the spotlight on urban centers, and they are also hotter than the countryside for various reasons, which our experts will point out. So let's start with each of your opinions. Dr. Indu, let me come to you first. You are the scientist on the panel. Short term, I mean, I know that IMD has started issuing warnings, it's making headlines, and the National Disaster Management has also combined to say that we are going to take some steps. But what do you think we need to do? How does this kind of temperature really affect human body and other lives?
We are all experiencing something that's unprecedented, which means to say, unfortunately, at least in places like Bangalore, people are kind of caught unawares. Which means to say there needs to be much more awareness building that needs to happen. People are not recognizing clearly the signs of the impacts of extreme heat. So which means, yes, early warning is being given, but is it actually reaching to the people who really matter? When I say, as we know, when we're talking about heat waves, it's not going to impact everybody. Every city needs to have a heat action plan, but it'll take some time. There are about 150 and odd that are already there, but the newer cities are coming under the radar of getting into the heat wave. So which means more and more cities have to prepare action plans, but that can happen later, or rather it will happen. But right now, what's pertinent is, how do we kind of provide water? How do we provide cooling centers at the right places? And of course, even though there is no law, can we kind of push people to recognize that there are extreme heat conditions and people need to be mindful of employing people during certain times,
right, and
also try to come up with something that could help these people who are out there.
I think it comes, but it comes too late. So Madhav Pai, for your city, CREDAI MCHI has yesterday in fact, come out with a notification that we are now beginning to give breaks to our construction workers in the afternoon. We will make sure that they will have medical help in case any one of them needs it. But Mumbai's already been on the boil. I mean, 40 degrees, 38 degrees isn't comfortable weather, and the most vulnerable are affected the most. Give me a sense as a policy thinker in terms of short term, whatever IMD and NDMA is planning, is it really working on the ground or there's more to be done?
the way for cities to think about this is, what is the individual action? What do individuals do when temperature is above a certain point? What does community do? Like a lot of times things like floods, etc., we are prepared to respond to as a community. But heat, today still everybody uses individual action. And then what is the city action? So we talk about, building resilience at these three levels, at the individual level, at the community level, and then at the city level. Now, city action, of course, one is to make sure that, once certain temperature thresholds are crossed, how do we communicate to these people? So that's sort of one thing. The other important thing is, as a community, how do we use community action? Because, we are in disaster space. And, in India, actually, in the disaster space, community action has been very strong when we respond to floods, cyclones. How do we sort of really leverage that community action to respond to heat? Maybe that, and what is that? What does that even mean in the context of heat? And this is the kind of work that the heat action plan needs to do. I think Mumbai this year has started issuing warnings, which is definitely, Mumbai has a climate action plan. The climate action plan is now quite mainstream. Heat is identified as one of the risks. And, they have been now issuing warnings via SMS, etc. So I think making sure that these messages reach to the people that they should reach to. And then I think some clear guidance on what are the policy actions that need to be taken. See, today we are still in the ad hoc space when it comes to dealing with heat as a disaster. And so I think that's the main thing. Start treating heat as a disaster and put a very, very clear, in the short term, a clear disaster management plan around this. Of course, and then there are some other actions that maybe I can come back to.
We'll come back to that. Nishant Lall, now over to Delhi. We had a really benign April and we were quite thankful for it. But, May has hit us hard, slammed us quite hard as well. Short-term measures, are you seeing them getting implemented through the heat action plan of IMD and NDMA?
One of the things I really think it should be done in short term as an urban designer, the government and the local agency have to really take over where the people are. And this is the railway stations, the airports, your bus stands, your mandi areas, which are working in the mornings till 11. And then that's the time when the peak heat area are. They should have an infrastructure to protect them. Whether it's extra hydration point, misters, cooling towers, whichever can help. Because that is the action plan which can be taken pretty immediately. The other thing we would like as an architect in short term, I think there has to be a going back to certain principles. You're ensuring your verandas are shaded. Architects have stopped using verandas actually in the new design. So we have to, to figure out what is which we are designing with.
All right, let me now come to this very important study, which I'm not sure if any one of you has got it, but the Guardian actually went out and sent questionnaires to all the scientists who are part of IPCC, climate scientists, and asked them, do they really believe that the world will be able to keep the heating or global warming to less than 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial level? We kind of knew the answer, but it's amazing that almost everyone agreed that it is not going to be 1.5 for sure, but it's going to catapult to 2.5 degrees Celsius. Do you believe so, Mr. Lall, that we are headed that way looking at the temperature changes? And are architects and urban planners keeping that in mind?
So the question, the architect and urban planners are very geared up to this issue. We've had several discussions in the professional field. Academia is also gearing up to teach students to go about it. And certainly whether it'll reach, I think it's already reached in many areas because the heat grows in different, it's called microclimates, and it changes by various degrees in a city. It's called the heat island effect. However, in extreme heat, that heat island effect is just exacerbated in just a single day. So allowing the buildings to dissipate that heat which they absorb during the day is the goal of all architects currently. Be aware of this problem, certainly in Delhi and now as we see in most of the areas in India.
Dr. Indu, what's your view on it? So that's the architects. They're saying we are having a lot of conversations around it. We are cognizant of the fact we do have a heat action plan at the national level. States are also recognizing it. But do Does everyone get it that we are hurtling towards a very, very hot world?
I think, yes, the increase is happening, but as you rightly said, I think if we need to communicate in a way, if people can actually perceive it better. For instance, I remember UK Met Office, there was a study which kind of, assessed the spell of record-breaking temperatures in India, and what they declared, or the study came out, said that instead of once in 312 years, we're going to be facing this kind of extreme heat once in 3 years. Now, there is the messaging. People kind of are, shocked, and they react to it. So I think we need to communicate in a way people are able to comprehend, acknowledge, and start acting accordingly.
You're saying better communication, and clearly, there is a recognition, but I don't think it's getting absorbed. Let's take a quick short break and come back to this important discussion. How can Indian cities rewire for rising temperatures and increasing heat waves? Stay with us.